TFA fam. What is going on? Welcome into yet another show. Tonight we're going to give you some trade targets. We haven't had any of these shows yet this season, but as the trade deadline starts to creep closer and closer in your fantasy leagues, you can look to either, maybe you're making some moves to get up into the playoff race. Maybe you're sitting comfortably. Maybe you're trying to sell some guys off from your roster. Whatever the case may be, if you have any questions, please hit us up on the YouTube comments. Hit us up in the Discord as well. But Kev, let's go ahead and jump into these Week 9 buy, sell targets. Who do you have as some buys for Week 9 and going forward?
Yeah, I'm going to start off kind of a little bit each position here. Quarterback, Justin Herbert. I know people are like, why would I want to buy Justin Herbert? He's been #bad, especially over the last couple of weeks of the season. The last 2 weeks against Baltimore and New England, he put up 12 and 15.8 fantasy points. Obviously, before that, he was on a heater where he scored 30.8, 21.3, and 42.8. But one of the reasons I want to buy him is because this offense is not this bad. Justin Herbert is not this bad. But one of the real reasons I want to buy him is because their fantasy playoff schedule is a dream. Chiefs, Texans, and Broncos for the fantasy playoffs. The Broncos being one of the tougher ones, but their pass defense has been a little susceptible as well. But the Chiefs Texans is about as good as you could ask for there. So even if you had to, you could always stream it that week. But I don't necessarily somebody who loves trading for quarterback, but I think he's somebody that you could probably get a little bit of a discount depending on who you may have at quarterback right now. If you're looking for a quarterback, he's 10th in passing yards, 10th in air yards, 8th in passing touchdowns on the season, 13th in fantasy points per dropback, and 9th in fantasy points per game. So yes, he's had a little bit of a dip in production over the last couple of weeks, but I'm buying Justin Herbert, especially because of that schedule they get for the fantasy playoffs. Next up on my list is Nick Chubb. Now listen, this has not been a great year for Nick Chubb, not kind of what we expected. However, he's still 15th in fantasy points per game. Despite missing, a little bit of time, he's still 11th in carries on the season. We obviously know Kareem Hunt's out. We're not really for sure how long he's going to be out at this point. He still didn't really see any more production in the passing game, but if you look at his first week back against Pittsburgh, only 7.9 fantasy points in that game. He had 16 carries, but people are probably going to be a little down on Nick Chubb. He hasn't really produced at the level that we thought he would. He only has one RB1 week on the season. However, things are looking up for Nick Chubb because they have the third easiest schedule remaining for running backs on the season. So I want to buy Nick Chubb, and I don't think it's going to cost nearly as much. I think you could get him at a pretty good discount. So if you're looking for a running back, I think Nick Chubb is where I would start to target. Wide receivers, Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson hasn't been fantastic this year. He's definitely been good, just not the same guy that we saw last year. He's 17th in fantasy points per game. He only has 63 targets on the year, which is 14th among all wide receivers. He has a 24.6% target share among all wide receivers, which is 20th. However, he does have a 39.5% market share of the air yards in this offense, with his 10th most among all wide receivers, and he's 5th in deep targets. So I'm buying Justin Jefferson right now, and I don't think it's going to cost as much as some of these other elite level wide receivers. And I think he's in prime to really kind of bounce back in a big way over the second half of the season. Next up on my list is DJ Moore. This dude absolutely was balling to start the season. He was really looking like he was on pace to be a top 5 wide receiver, but that has really kind of cratered since really week 4 when he went off at 31.9, because since that point, we're looking at 8.8, 10.9, 13.3, and 9.9 over that span. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they've just missed on Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey's been gone. This offense has not looked the same since he's been out. And the good news is Christian McCaffrey is supposed to return to practice this week. He may play this week. At worst, he's going to be back next week. But all the other metrics are there for DJ Moore. He is 3rd among all wide receivers in targets. He has a 29.5% target share, 5th most among all wide receivers. He's 5th in air yards, 7th in market share of air yards, and he's 16th in fantasy points per game. So everything else is there for DJ Moore. I think this offense really gets back on track with the return of Christian McCaffrey. I think it adds another element that he's been missing in this offense, that kind of safety valve. So buy DJ Moore where you can. Last but not least, that wide receiver, I have DeVonta Smith. probably the most unlucky wide receiver we've seen so far this year. He should have a lot more, I think, fantasy production than what he has right now. He's 49th in fantasy points per game to this point. However, he's 10th in air yards and 8th in market share of air yards. And so those are two really good indicators that good things are coming for him. And he has 11 deep targets on the season, which is 18th among all wide receivers. He has a 23% target share in this offense. And so I think good things are coming for DeVonta Smith. I think he's just been unlucky. We've seen multiple times this year where he should have had a touchdown. It just hasn't come to fruition. Most of them are all called back on penalties. And the one thing that I love about DeVonta Smith, and it's kind of something we've been talking about when I mentioned buying Miles Sanders before he went down with injury, is they have the second easiest schedule for wide receivers to finish out the season. So this schedule is a dream for the Eagles. So DeVonta Smith is an absolute buy. It's not going to cost you really anything to get him because he just hasn't really produced on the same level as, like his counterpart, the rookie counterpart of Jamar Chase has. I think he bounces back in a big way and really shows why he was one of the top draft picks of this last year's class. So buy DeVonta Smith where you can.
Actually, I have two more wide receivers to tack on here before we move on to our sells for week 9. One, Mike Williams. And let me take you on a trip down memory lane. Through the first 3 weeks of the season, Mike Will was the half PPR wide receiver 3. In week 4, he finished as wide receiver 104, and he was still a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. Week 5, he finishes as the wide receiver 1, but in his past 2 games, he's been half PPR wide receiver 71 and 77. You already touched on the playoff schedule with Justin Herbert, but even before we get to the playoffs, he gets Philly this week, Minnesota, Pittsburgh, Denver, Cincy, the Giants, KC, Houston, Denver, like you talked about in the fantasy playoffs. So we know that Mike Williams was a big part of this offense. He's going to get back to that point. The Baltimore game before their bye week, he was banged up. And then this past week, it was something that, that I talked about in some of the streams, some of the videos we did, that we shouldn't be surprised if Mike Williams kind of gets taken out of the game plan, because that's what the Patriots do. They have their outside corner who's been playing really well, whose name is escaping me right now. But we shouldn't have been surprised that he was kind of shut out of that game, right? So I think Mike Williams makes for a really nice buy low here. And my second one, this is geared more toward teams that are kind of in the driver's seat in their leagues, and that is going to be Antonio Brown. Obviously, the Bucs are on their bye this week, and even after they come back from their bye, they still might not have Antonio Brown with the injury that he is currently nursing. The only bad matchups they have the rest of the year after they come off their bye are the Saints, Buffalo, and Carolina, which, again, with Tom Brady, with this offense, you could argue that there's not really any bad matchups for them because of all the weapons they have. If you are in a point where you can, you have the luxury to kind of pick up AB and stash him, especially if he is on a team that's kind of struggling, kind of fighting and vying for a playoff spot, I think he makes a lot of sense for teams, that are contenders to go out and buy, because I think he could pay off in a big way down the stretch. Let's go ahead and move over onto our sells. I'll just kick things off. I'll talk about my two. Going to keep the wide receiver theme going. I'm going to go with DeAndre Hopkins, and he has probably been a sell for most of the year, unfortunately. Maybe you can get some name value return out of him, but you're probably going to have to take a loss at this point. Hopkins only has 3 wide receiver 1 weeks, 2 wide receiver 2 weeks, and everything else outside of that has been wide receiver 4 or worse. He's just simply not getting the target share and the volume that we're used to seeing. They have the 5th lowest pass rate in the league, which, obviously doesn't help because he's not seeing the amount of targets he's used to seeing to begin with. And then there's less targets to go around because of their pass rate being so low. So D-Hop is a guy that I would look to move on from. Again, maybe this isn't the week to do it since he's coming off of the injury, didn't play too well. Maybe someone who in your league is looking at this as a buy low opportunity, and I would just be moving on from him at this point. The other one I have who I think is a pretty nice sell high is Damien Harris. Now, giving up, solid RB2 production is difficult, especially in a league and in a game where we are, everyone is kind of, scratching and fiending for RB production. But with the matchups that Harris has coming up, they aren't very fantasy friendly, especially for a running back who isn't even averaging 2 targets per game. I think he's sitting at 1.5 on the year through these first couple weeks. They get Carolina this week, not a great matchup. Cleveland, not a great matchup. Atlanta and Tennessee, those are obviously nice. But then after that, they get Buffalo. They have their bye week. They come back from bye. They have Indy, Buffalo again, and then Jacksonville in week 17. So after, this past week, he put up 80 yards, another touchdown. I would see if you could send Harris away, because there's no doubt going to be a team in your league that's looking for rock solid RB2 production. Those are the two that I have. Kev, I know you have somebody. Who do you got here for your sell for week 9?
Yeah, I want to talk about Mike Gesicki. Now, listen, Mike Gesicki is somebody that I really like, but I'm just a little concerned with, now that DeVonta Parker is back, as DeVonta Parker missed time, and a lot of his big production came while DeVonta Parker was out. And, you bring in DeVonta Parker, and now we're going to get Will Fuller back here and probably the next week or two as well. And so you just add all these other guys back into this offense, and I just don't know if there's going to be enough targets to go around for Mike Gesicki. And for somebody that has produced as well as he has, even last week, we saw a drop in targets that we haven't seen really going all the way back to week 1. 4 targets was the least amount he's seen. Because before that, you're looking at 6, 12, 6, 7, 9, 8, and then last week was 4, 3 receptions for 40 yards, 9.8, which he still is a tight end 1, but 9.8. That compared to what he's been seeing. So I still think that people will look at him and how great he's played this year and probably overvalue a little bit. And I think you could actually sell high on him and include him in a package. I don't think rest of season is going to be able to maintain the ridiculous output that he had there for that long stretch, especially with everybody coming back. Now, of course, a lot of these guys are injury prone. So if a lot of these guys go down again, then he can come back. But I'm just not buying. I'm not going to bet on that. And so if you can sell Mike Gesicki, I think that's somebody you can. The last person that, not somebody that I'm saying to sell, but I think you're going to start hearing this drumbeat, is Alvin Kamara. And everybody's going to base it off the 4 games last year with Taysom Hill, because it sounds like Taysom Hill is going to make it back this week. And everybody's going to point to the target share that Alvin Kamara had in those games. And Taysom Hill is not going to look for Alvin Kamara in the passing game. And I'm going to tell you, that's ridiculous. If people are going to be nervous about Alvin Kamara, I would actually probably call him a buy, because people are going to be scared off of that production that he had while he played. But people forget that in the script that they had over that 4-game sample size, the Saints rolled every one of those teams. One of the games, Denver didn't even have a damn quarterback. They rolled the Falcons in the other 2. The one game they had where it was a pretty decent game, he saw 10 targets against Philly where they trailed. 7 receptions on 10 targets, 94 yards and a touchdown. If anybody in your league is scared about Alvin Kamara, buy Alvin Kamara. But heaven forbid, if you hear any of these idiots tell you to sell Alvin Kamara, stop listening to them now, because that is ridiculous. We shouldn't be basing our opinion off a 4-game sample size that happened last year with Taysom Hill. That's all.
That is going to wrap things up for us, guys. Please give us some feedback. Let us know what you thought. Let us know if there's a way that we can help you out more with these buy and sell recommendations. Any questions you have, drop them in the YouTube. Make sure that you are subbed as well. You can also join the Discord, which is absolutely free if you want to be part of the TFA fam. And we'll talk to you on the next one.